I'm Ashley and I'm a second year vet student at St. George's University. And for today's vlog, we are going to be talking about my VMCAS application, which is the veterinary application to apply to some stateside schools, Caribbean schools, and European schools, including Australia as well. I actually applied to vet school 3 times, and the third time I did get accepted to Ross University, St. George's University, and the University of Sydney. If you do have any questions about why I chose SGU over the other schools I was accepted to, I did make a video recently about that, so please be sure to check it out. But for today's video, we're just going to be talking about my application and kind of what I put into it, and also talking about the GRE and the CASPER exam, because I did take both, because at the time I applied the first time, I did have to take the GRE because a lot of the schools were still requiring it at that point, and the CASPER exam was introduced in the second 2 of the 3 application cycles I applied to. Since I did apply to vet school 3 times, I did change my application a little bit each time, so if you do want to know the specifics on what I did change, please let me know down in the comments, because I can definitely make a video just about that. And my third application, I did apply to 23 schools just to increase my chances of getting into vet school. So if you have any specific questions about supplemental applications or prerequisites for the schools I did apply to, please let me know down below, because I know some required resumes, cover letters, some required extra essays and different prerequisites, so I can definitely go into more detail about that. So first I'm going to talk about the GRE. I know not a lot of schools require it anymore, so I'm just going to make it kind of brief on what my scores actually were. My scores were not that good for the GRE. I scored a 280 on the quantitative and verbal portion of the exam, and then for the analytical writing, I scored a 4.5 out of 6, I think. And some of the schools did require it. I don't believe SGU required it, but I know a lot of the stateside schools at the time did require it for me. So for the CASPER exam, that was I want to say an hour-and-a-half exam, because you get like a few breaks in between, but the CASPER exam for me actually went pretty well. It's a scenario-based type exam that you take online, and honestly it was kind of nice, like going over basic things. What would you do in this type of situation versus this situation? It wasn't just based on veterinary medicine though, so I did like that fact. Like, how would you deal with a conflict with a coworker, or what would you do if your owner or business person said something that you didn't agree with? What would you do to maybe change their mind or do something differently, develop better protocols? So I thought this exam was a lot better than the GRE. Unfortunately though, with the CASPER exam, the scores are sent directly to the schools and you never actually get them yourself. So I really don't know how I did, but I guess I did well enough to get into vet school, because I believe at the time SGU did require the CASPER exam, but I don't know if they do anymore. If any of you know, please put it down in the comments, because I do get a lot of questions about the CASPER exam and the GRE and kind of what the minimum GPA is. And sometimes it's hard to keep track because all the schools change their requirements every year, it seems, or adding like different classes or getting rid of prerequisites. So it would be nice to know if SGU still requires the CASPER exam. If any of you do have questions regarding the CASPER or the GRE, it's always best to ask the admissions team of any of the schools you're looking at applying to, just to make sure you don't have to take it or do have to take it. because it's kind of pointless if you have to pay to take an exam and then it turns out the school doesn't even require it. So please make sure during the summer or during like your application cycle that you're checking off every list of things you need to get done. So just be sure to ask. Alright, this next part, everyone asks me this question all the time. Did I have a bachelor degree? What was my GPA? What was my science GPA? I was not the best academic student for vet school. My grades were good, but they weren't very competitive for vet school. So I did have a hard time getting in, but I did have a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Findlay in Animal Science Pre-Vet. And I did have a cumulative GPA of a 3.22, and my science GPA was a 2.81. I did have several C's in a lot of my science courses because I didn't really get the teaching methods that they used at the university. I kind of wish I had went to like a community college to take some of the science level courses, because I don't know, doing hands-on learning is a lot better for me than just doing it book work, and unfortunately that's what Findlay did with the upper science level classes, so that was difficult. I did have to repeat organic chemistry too, biochemistry, and cell biology. So you can get into vet school if you have C's, and if you don't do well in your upper level science courses. It's just, they are extremely difficult courses, and when you're taking like 18, 21 credit hours a term, that's a lot, especially if you're working part-time like I was, and in clubs and leadership roles. It does get to be a lot, but that's kind of what my GPA was during undergrad. And the last 45 hours, I believe that was a 3.3, but I'm not 100% sure because some of the schools calculated my last 45 credit hours differently, and with just upper level classes only, it was a little bit strange. So I believe that's what my GPA was for the last 45 credit hours. So for the next portion of this video, I'm going to be talking about my animal experience on what I had on my application. So I did work at a boarding kennel, a grooming facility. I also volunteered at a therapeutic riding barn. Also, for the University of Findlay, we were required to learn basic husbandry of food animals for a class. So I did get quite a bit of experience learning how to feed them, how to maintain the area they were in. And by the time I applied, the third try, I had over 2,000 hours of animal experience that was not veterinary related. For my extracurricular activities, I did quite a bit of different things in undergrad. I tried to break it up within the 4 years, but at some points I was doing 3 officer positions in 1 year, and that was a lot, probably way too much, especially with the amount of credit hours we had, but I did it. I did a lot of different things about veterinary medicine just to see what this field entailed and what I could do as a vet instead of just doing clinical work. So I joined a webinar learning about aquaculture just to see what there is for a veterinarian to do in the fish industry, because there is a whole field just for that. And I got to meet some of the veterinarians I used to work with it, so that was also kind of nice, just learning the different aspects of the field. I was a Kiwanis Club member at one point during the summers when I was at home in Indiana, just because I wanted to do something during the summer other than working. I was on the Motorboard National Honor Society. I was a part of the Diversity Club, where I was the public relations and treasurer for 2 years. And I also did the Pre-Vet Club newsletter editor position, where I was in charge of publishing the newsletter every 2 months. So it wasn't too time consuming, but I did have to collect all of the articles together and submit it in one PDF. I also was a public relations officer for the Disability Awareness Club. That I also did photography during my undergrad a lot. During my high school year, I was the Keystone Club Public Affairs Officer in Germany for a year, and that was a great experience learning how to advertise and market different things. And then I did golf for about 12 years during my time in Europe, and then once I got to the States, I just did it more as a hobby. So with all that being said, the extracurricular activities was around 5,000 hours that I put on my application. For the employment non-animal related section of the veterinary application, I did put that I worked as a floral clerk at Kroger for one summer, and I also worked part-time during school at the University of Findlay as a student clerical assistant / researcher for the previous president of the university, Dr. DeBeau-Fried. And I worked with him for about 4 years until he passed away. And that was such a great job. I learned so much from him, and it was such an honor to work with him. But overall, I got about 2,000 hours worth of experience working at both of these places, so that's what I put on my application. During undergrad, I did do some research that I put on my veterinary application, working with zebrafish and learning their behaviors before and after injury, because zebrafish has the capability to regenerate different parts of their bodies after an injury occurs. We were trying to see if they could learn the same behaviors after a brain-related injury. So that's kind of what the research I was doing at the time, and that's all that I had really on the research aspect. I didn't have that much. It totaled around 200 hours, but it was a really good learning experience. So some of the veterinary experiences I had that I put on my application was working at a clinic called Pet Wellness Clinics, where I worked on exotic small animals and pocket pets. For the other clinics I worked at, I also worked at VIP Animal Care, where that was a mixed animal practice for about a year. And then I also worked for a term at a clinic near my college. It was called Blanchard Valley Veterinary Clinic, and I got to observe the doctors working on birds and reptiles, and also on the dogs and cats as well. And then for the University of Findlay, they did require us to learn veterinary related services for horses and food animals. So I did get that experience as well. And our class was taught by a veterinarian, so we did count that as veterinary hours. And I also did work at the Veterinary Medical Center Europe in Germany with the military dogs and the civilian animals. So that was kind of like a basic intro to my veterinary experiences. I can probably go into a lot more detail in a different video if you guys want me to. But overall, I had a total of 4,000 hours of veterinary experience before I applied the third time. So if you do have any questions specifically about that, please let me know. There is another section on the veterinary application that's quite important. It's the volunteer section that's non-animal related. I did put quite a few different experiences I had down there. So I did volunteer working at the International Coffee and Tea Tasting, where I just helped serve tea and coffee during the event. And I was a youth service ambassador for about a year at the University of Findlay. And I did help out with the Findlay Hope House, where it was a shelter for women and children from domestic abuse situations, so they had a safe place to stay. I also volunteered with the American Red Cross for a couple of terms. Since I can't donate blood myself, I have to volunteer my time instead. That's kind of what I like to do. I do enjoy volunteering a lot, and that was just one way for me to do it. I also joined a event working as a server with the Large Star event, where they were providing dogs for blind people. So they were training the puppies, and then they were providing the dogs over to the blind household for free. But we all know that comes at a cost. So they raise money every year to get the money that they need to raise the puppies and train them correctly to give it away to someone who needs them. And then I also did the mobile food pantry several times at the University of Findlay, where I helped hand out food to the homeless. I also worked at the new kitchen store, where I was helping out, handing out samples of food that the store was selling. I also volunteered at the Mazu Museum, where we got to do lots of fun day Sundays, where the children and the community could come in and just have a great time. There was a theme each month, and it was quite a lot of fun just volunteering, just to see what the theme was at that time and see all the different creative things that happen. But overall, I had a total of 160 hours in this section. It doesn't seem like a lot, but when you factor in kind of everything that you're doing in school, it is quite a bit. So every little bit helps on your application. I know for like some of the events I put on this section, it was only one day, one time, and it was only like 2 or 3 hours, but I did put it on there just because the universities do like seeing applicants that are well-rounded in different things other than animal-related things. So it is very important to put stuff like that on your application. Okay, for this next part of the video, I'm going to be talking about some of the honors, scholarships, and awards I received during the time that I was applying. And most of these awards I got during my undergraduate career. I did list all the conferences I attended. It is very important to list those just because you are taking time out of your school schedule or out of your holiday to do something like this. So please make sure to put those conferences and awards and scholarships down, because it will help. So if you do have any specific questions about any of these trips, conferences I attended, or honors or awards, scholarships, please let me know down in the comments. I'm just going to list them out. I have the list right in front of me just because I don't want to take up too much time on this section unless you have specific questions about it. I'm not trying to brag in any way. This is just what I put on my application, but I did want to mention it is very important to put any conferences or trips that you went on, school related, just because it might help you get in and look like a more well-rounded applicant for vet school. So if you aren't sure about putting something on your application, just go ahead and put it on there because it can't hurt. Even if it's minuscule, like, just put it on there. I know it takes a long time to input everything, but it is important to do it, just so it's all there. And I believe this portion does save every time you have to apply, so even if you do have to reapply to vet school, this section is saved, as long as you use the same username and password. The only things that are not saved during that time, I believe you have to send in your transcripts again, and you have to get your letters of recommendation re-inputted. So I'm just gonna list off all the stuff I did during my undergrad and high school and a little bit of middle school, not too much of that. But I will put that all down just so you guys can hear it and see kind of what are some examples of things that you can put on your application. So I did go on the alternate spring break trip at the University of Findlay. I also did all the fall leadership retreats at the University of Findlay. I did submit photography artwork into the art gallery on campus. I was a presenter at the Symposium for Scholarship and Creativity for the zebrafish research I did. I was presented a huge honor of joining the Motorboard National Senior Honor Society. I also went to the Ohio Zebrafish Undergraduate Research Conference just to present the research that we did on campus. I also did the Pre-Vet Club spring break trips where we toured different vet schools around the United States for 3 years. I did the Agriculture Future of America Leaders Conference for one time, and I was also partnered with Merrick Animal Health at the time. And I was the Hancock County Fair photographer for the horse pulling event on the fairgrounds. I did place in the top 5 of the Internative Leadership Challenge at the University of Findlay. I did receive the William J. Wagner Award for the Lyme disease paper I wrote in the Intro to Writing for Sciences course that I took at the University of Findlay. And for photography, I did become a curator on the viewbug.com website. I did get the Office of Development Educational Assistance Scholarship from the Advancement Office. I did become a Star Strider. So Star Strider was the highest volunteer hours that you had during like a month span, and I had the highest amount of volunteer hours at that time. It was for a club. And then I did get the Dean's List at the University of Findlay for 2 semesters. I also got the General Henry H. Arnold Education Grant for 3 years, I believe. The 4th year, I don't think I got accepted for that award. I also was given the Union Township Alumni Association Scholarship. I also did the National Keystone Conference for 2 years in different parts of the States. And this was from Germany that I got accepted to join this conference. And I was also a National Youth of the Year nominee. I did attend the United States Air Force and Europe Teen Leadership Keystone Camp. That was also somewhere in the States. I also joined the European Keystone Conference in California, I believe. And during my high school in Germany, I got the Ramstein High School Honors Principal List for 2 years. And then I had high honors for the last year that I was there. And then during my middle school time, I was a Voice in a Million singer for one of the performances at the O2 Center in England. And that's it for the long list of scholarships and honors and awards. But if you do have any specific questions about each one, I can actually place them in the description so you can see them if you need it. If you don't, I won't put it on there. But again, if you do have any specific questions about that type of stuff, please let me know. So for the next part of the veterinary application, you do have to do your personal statement. And for my personal statement, I went into detail about how my life was like as an Air Force child, where I started my veterinary experiences in Germany, and then we had to move to the States my senior year of high school. So I kind of explained different parts of that. And then I also went into more detail about how I challenged myself to go into different parts of the field just to get an idea on what I was looking at doing later on in the future. And then I did go into more detail again about what I wanted to do as a researcher in the veterinary field. But I can probably go into a whole lot more detail about the personal statement because this is one of the biggest things on your application. I can definitely give out tips. I can help you with writing if you need it. But that's kind of what I did with my application. It's definitely different for everyone with regards to the personal statement because I know I had the hardest time figuring out what I wanted to write about because I didn't want to sound like I was complaining about my life or bragging about it. So I went from a different angle to show how I grew as an individual and why I should be chosen for veterinary school based on the hardships I did face as a military child. So I went and did that type of detail. But if you do have any specific questions about that, or you want to learn some more about like tips for writing your personal statement, please let me know down below. For the letters of recommendation I did have 2 veterinarians write me a letter of recommendation, and I did have one from a professor. This professor was the one who nominated me for the William J. Wagner Award for the Lyme disease paper I wrote. And then I did have one other letter written from a supervisor at the University of Findlay that I worked for a number of years. And that is going to be it for this vlog though. If you do have any specific questions or need help with your own personal application, just comment down below or you can message me on the Facebook group. It's totally up to you. I know how stressful this process can be. It was extremely stressful when I went through it, so I can't even imagine what it's like now with the amount of applicants that are applying each year now. But if you have any specific questions about SGU or Ross or Sydney or any of the schools I applied to, I can actually put like a list of the schools I applied to down in the description of this video so you can know which ones I did apply to. But I hope you all have a great day, and I will catch you on the next vlog.